contrast with a strong reeds. So strong reeds in the scripture is referring to actually women who are strong reeds. That means they are extremely resilient, and then of course sometimes wicks can talk about flames. It can talk about the light that is either hidden under a bushel or it can be put on a lampstand. So today I have a picture for you, and what I'm going to do, so that you don't panic, is I'm going to put a link right now in the I'm going to put a link in the chat box so that you will have all the notes for tonight. And this includes the 3 verses that we'll be doing. So I put that in there, as well as Lian has just put the link to the YouTube. And then after the session, we will put the audio. If you give me 5 minutes, we'll put it back into the student guide for tonight. So I found I screenshotted something from a investigative sort of documentary from the Shroud of Turin, a BBC documentary, and I've given you the link in the bibliography as well, which you can watch. It's quite long. It's almost an hour long, but it's among the better documentaries, because it doesn't just deal with Turin, but it deals with many different shrouds and the historical backdrop to that. What I wanted to show you was the sudarium. It's the head gear or the sweat cloth, which is sort of apart from the rest of the linen clothes. And this was actually part of the investigation as to what the first century Jewish tomb looked like. So so that is the sort of a graphic image there. Okay, so and also it's theorized this might have been what Peter and John saw on the first Easter, on the resurrection morning, the first one. So okay, so let's jump right in, and I will just give a little insight here. We begin with an introduction. One of the significant textual evidence for modal behavior, and we are talking about modalities here, differences or individual differences in behavior, is found in the post-resurrection narrative of 2 disciples searching for proof that God had raised Jesus from the dead. So one disciple followed, quote, on the heels of another, who reaches the empty tomb first, but does not enter. The second disciple, who arrives seconds after, does not hesitate to go straight through into the cavernous mouth of the tomb spontaneously. The Greek word chosen to describe this follower is from the root from which we get acolyte, akalutheo, a believer who demonstrates faith by action. Okay, faith by action. So let's go to that now. John 20 verse 5, and hang on, I forgot to share my sound. Oh yeah, it's on already. Okay, John 20, verse 5 from Rob Cummings. Let me know if you can hear the sound.
John 20, verse 5. Kai parakupsas, blepe kemena ta arthonia, u mentoi eis eilthen. If you'll recall, right before this, Peter and the other disciple were running to the tomb, and the other disciple, the beloved disciple, ran ahead, so he got there first. We read, and stooping down, or after having stooped down, this is singular, it's nominative masculine singular, it's an aorist active participle, it's referring to the activity of the beloved disciple. This is from the verb parakupto, to stoop down, perhaps temporal in this instance. After he stooped down, he looked, right? He saw, and this is a narrative or historical presence, but I'm translating it in the past because it's part of historical narrative, right? So we could say he sees. So after he stooped down, he sees, but in the final translation, he saw. He saw the linen cloths lying implied there. He saw the linen cloths lying, the line there. However, he did not enter. He did not go in. Now, this kemena, we've seen this quite a few times in the Gospel of John. See this a lot in the New Testament. You have a verb of perception, and then you will have the thing that is seen, and then you'll have a participle further describing the thing seen, something about the thing being seen. In this case, he doesn't just see the cloths, but he sees the cloths lying there. And I would argue perhaps the best label for this participle would be a supplementary participle, although some grammars will label it a predicate. Some will say this is the object, this is the complement. But perhaps this participle is best labeled a supplementary participle. It is from the verb kemai, to lie, to lie down, not to tell a falsehood, but to be lying down or be resting somewhere. And it can refer to people or it can refer to objects as well. And this is a neuter accusative plural form. And why is it neuter accusative plural? Because it's describing the noun there. It's further telling us something about the object that is seen. Let's also parse very quickly eis eilthen. That is from the verb eis erkomai. Eis erkomai. To go eis erkomai means I am going in. And this form here is just a second aorist active indicative. It's third person singular. He entered. He went in. But notice it's negated. Ooh, eis eilthen. He did not go in. Don't forget your little adversative particle there. However, he did not enter.
Okay, so once again, let me just get back to the notes which I have put in the chat box. So here's that picture again, and you can examine it for yourself. This is just a mock-up of what it might have looked like on resurrection morning. Now in the notes you'll find an oblong box where it actually gives you a small sort of a thumbnail of John 20 verse 5. So what you can do is whenever you see this long oblong, then that is a link to the YouTube video from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, where Rob Cummings gives you the breakdown of John 20 verse 5. So like what I will do is I will, on my own time, I will just watch it like 2, 3, 4 times and even write it down if I need to. So that you don't freak out. You just know that you can always go to that link in the notes there. Okay, so the picture, therefore, we get is of Peter. Let me just put in the chat box there. Hold on. All right, so the picture we get is Peter. Peter is following John, who arrives first at the scene of the grave clothes. But then, for whatever reason, he does not go into the cave, right? He does not go into the cave, but hangs back momentarily. And so the beloved John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, the beloved John, arrives first at the tomb, followed by another, Simon Peter by name. Okay, we'll see this in just a moment, who spontaneously enters where John hesitates. So both disciples are headed in the right direction, and both are among the first to witness the grave close and the angels, but one hangs back while the other jumps right in. Okay. Now, you may have heard of the controversy concerning the Shroud of Turin. Okay, the Shroud of Turin. So I just wanted to, just so that everybody knows about this, it's not really part of the theology of John 20, but it's good at least for you to know about it and what's the latest development, because there's been a lot of new research coming out. The Shroud of Turin research teams who have pieced together evidence from the bloodstains, the linen folds, the sudarium, the headcloth, and other forensic breadcrumbs that link this artifact to a man who existed during the time of the first century, or so it is thought, having been subjected to crucifixion. That's important because only the Romans did crucifixion. So we're only talking about somewhere between the first century, somewhere between the time of the Caesars until the demise of the western part of the Roman Empire around the Mediterranean part, right? So they are the people who did, that was the empire at the time, who that crushed the Jewish state, or the Jewish uprisings that led to the destruction of Jerusalem. So there's this man, he existed during the time of the first century, subjected to crucifixion because there are wounds, right, in the side and in his head, and apparently with the blood type of AB. So tonight's lesson examines two modal behaviors. Okay, so I think this is the next one. Tonight's lesson examines two modal behaviors that mirrors differences in responses similar to what we have seen in John's hesitation to enter the tomb and Peter's spontaneity. Both eventually believed what they saw, but their behavior speaks of differences in modality. One approach being more inclined to believe without seeing, and the other to the need to examine the evidence firsthand. We find this pattern likewise repeated in real time when we compare and contrast how phenomena impacts different people differently. In the case of the prophetia, there seems to be a greater speed to coming to conclusions that others might find uncomfortable or difficult at first to grasp. Okay, so I think we can go, let me just double check here. Yeah, John 20 in your notes, we can now go to John 20 verse 6. Okay, so let me just go. Now, if your first time to study Greek with me, don't worry, we'll sign you up immediately tonight and get you a tutor if you are interested. It's quite a very, very simple process to just get the rudiments of it.
This is Dave, head of marketing at a ketchup company, about to use Grammarly to handle it.
The Greek alphabet, practicing Koine.
Sorry, I got the wrong one. John 6, this is the one here. Yeah. Let's try it again. Let me know if you can hear it.
John 20, verse 6. Erketai un kai Simon Petros, akaluthon auto, kai eis elthen eis ta menemeon, kai theore ta authonia kamena. Remember that right before this, the beloved disciple stooped down, getting to the tomb first, and saw the linen cloths lying there. We read, so Simon Peter also came following him, and he entered into the tomb, and he saw the linen cloths lying, implied, there. Okay, several fun things we could look at here. We notice we have some narrative or historical presence, right? He comes, he sees, but in the final translation, we would translate those in the past tense, as because we don't use the narrative present the same way that Greek does. We have a participle here, akaluthon, from akalutheo, to follow, and I suppose this might be telling us the manner in which he comes. He comes, as I think Murray Harris says, hard on the heels of the beloved disciple, following him. Remember, the verb akalutheo takes a dative object or dative complement. That's why auto is in the dative, following him, hard on his heels. The auto there referring to the beloved disciple. Eis elthen is from eis erchomai. Eis erchomai means I go in. So eis elthen here means he went in. That's just a second aorist active indicative third person singular. The third singular subject is, of course, Simon Peter. He entered into the tomb. Notice it's quite common in Greek to have the prepositional prefix on the compound verb repeated afterwards with no emphasis, just as a stylistic pattern. We see again, we saw this just up above in the previous verse, but we have a verb of perception here, theoreo, the verb theoreo, to see. Up above, it was the verb blepe. Remember that John loves near synonyms. I know that some commentators try to make this verb mean something different, or seem something more intense than blepo, but I do think John's style argues in favor of just seeing it synonymously. He saw. Right? What did Peter? He saw the linen cloths lying there. So we have a verb of perception, and then we have that followed by the object. Here's the object. And then we have a participle telling us something further about the object. Up above, I argued that perhaps the best way to label that would be a supplementary participle. Let's see if we can spell that correctly. Supplementary participle. Although some grammars will label this a predicate participle, and some grammars will say that this is the object, and then the participle is the complement. Notice how the participle matches case number and gender, the noun that it tells us something further about. So it is a neuter accusative plural, and it's from the verb kamai, verb kamai, to lie or recline. In this case, referring to not to people, but to objects. And so the full parsing on that would be a present middle participle, neuter accusative plural.
Okay, so let's continue. Here, we have two different responses. And might I add that this is one of the few places where you actually see one disciple following another disciple. This is quite significant because Jesus is not around, right? I mean, he's around, but he's not physically present with them at that time. He was sort of the object of the search. And so you've got John in the front, and then you've got Peter in the back, hard on the heels, as Cummings says, right? Professor Cummings. So the idea here is that you can actually have one man following another man, and then the person who is leading you is then overtaken by the person who was following. Sort of like you can have a Moses and a Joshua, or you can have a Paul and a Timothy, but then Timothy can overtake Paul, and Joshua can overtake Moses. just like Elisha can overtake Elijah. The double, talking about the double anointing or the double portion. The idea is that your following of Jesus must be according to your modal excellence. One of the questions that we're looking at is, of course, what was the reason for John's hesitation? He stoops down, he sees the Sudarian and he sees the linen cloth, but he doesn't go in, whereas Peter goes straight in, right? So here in the post resurrection narrative, we find two disciples faced with evidence that demands a verdict, right? What more does one need, right? John immediately sees the graves closed, stained with blood and bearing the marks of a prisoner tortured before crucifixion, then wrapped according to community laws and custom, placed in a guarded tomb, formerly sealed off by a massive boulder, but it's not there anymore, right? It's moved, it's been shifted. But Peter, he sees it a little different, right? He doesn't, Peter doesn't hesitate in a way. He wants to go right in. He wants to dive right in, right? He seeks to physically handle the evidence. If the body had been stolen, why unwrap the linen and remove only the naked body? It doesn't make sense. This is actually quite I mean, if you think about it, it's quite logical, right? If you're going to steal a body, you would presumably want to steal the body. Why would you unwrap the grave clothes? You would steal the whole body, right? So, but here in this case, you know, they get a chance to examine the grave clothes. I don't know. I'm just imagining in my mind that Peter goes in and then he sees the grave clothes, right? And it's stained in all the places where it's supposed to be stained, at the head, at the feet, at the hands, at the side. The blood is there, right? But something about that piece of cloth automatically gives him the impression that Jesus is no longer dead, but alive. So he's running the heuristics in his brain right now. Sorry, when this should be Peter, when Peter outran John, sorry, I was getting my characters wrong, and subsequent realization, right? When Peter outran John, and the subsequent realization by John and Peter, we may be able to reconstruct what happens if we take the eyewitness account seriously. Okay, so what is it about the resurrection cloth, or what is it about the pieces of evidence that tells them almost immediately that a resurrection has taken place? Okay, so now let's go over to verse 7. And let me see if I can get verse 7 up. Let me just get, where is my verse 7? Yeah, okay, here. Let me know if it works.
John 20, verse 7. Kaita sudarion, hain epites kephales autu, u meta ton athanion kamenon, ala choris, intitulig menon eis hena topon. Well, to translate this verse properly, we need to glance at the previous verse to pick up our subject here. Simon Peter saw the linen cloths lying implied there, And what else did he see? He saw the handkerchief or the face cloth or the sweat cloth. This is a Latin loan word that only occurs 4 times in the New Testament. You can look at the lexicons to get a little more information about it. But he saw the sweat cloth, and we have a relative pronoun now telling us something else about the sweat cloth, which was upon his head. That is, it was placed upon Jesus' head when he was buried. Some further descriptions now about where the sweat cloth was. This handkerchief now, it was not with not lying with the linen cloths, but apart, having been rolled up apart in one place. In other words, set by itself apart, rolled up or folded up in its own place. Now let's look at this participle here, entatulig, it's a mouthful, entatulig menon. As soon as you see that men morpheme, you think to yourself, oh yeah, Plummer warned me. When you see that men morpheme, you think about men sitting in the middle of the pew, too often being passive in the church, not doing their part. That is going to be a middle passive participle thing. And as soon as you see this reduplication here, notice that, of course, we have this prepositional prefix in, but this right here, the te, is reduplication. You have reduplication, that's going to be a perfect middle passive participle. And in the context of the verse, perfect passive participle, having been rolled up. It is accusative neuter singular. Why is it accusative neuter singular? To describe the sweat cloth here, ta sudarion. I would argue it's another supplementary participle. Remember the verb up above? He saw the sweat cloth having been rolled up apart by itself in its own place, in one place. The verb that's being used here is entuliso. And you may or may not remember that when you see a present tense form of the verb that has a double sigma in the ending, the real root of that is going to have a gamma, a kappa, or a chi. This something was added to make the present tense. So we're not surprised at all to find a gamma here in a form outside of the present or the imperfect.
Okay, so once again, if you have not signed up for our basic Greek, we call it interlinear studies. Just go ahead and let us know, or you can see Nizelle there, and she will straight away sign you up for the basic course. You will need this throughout the MDiv program. At least not necessary to know all the Greek and all the grammar of it, but certainly you will need to know your ABCs and enough to read around the commentaries and so on and so forth. Okay, so the next question is a question of conclusions. And what conclusions can we draw from these things? All right, so can we? Okay, let me just get my screen back here. Can we draw conclusions from the sequence of actions on the first resurrection morning? Have we personally, have you ever observed times where, like John at the mouth of the empty tomb, we've failed to be moved to action? Have we been given to the immediacy, or on the other hand, have we been given to the immediacy of an emergency to the point of taking immediate action, like Peter, who rendered direct assistance in response to possible danger or an opportunity to bring calm? Let me just pause here just for a minute and ask everyone if you do have a thought as to why John hesitated from going in. And anybody had a possible ideas? Why would he not go directly into the tomb? Anyone? Just unmute yourself. Go ahead. Any thoughts?
Hi, Pastor.
Yeah.
Hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that because John loved Jesus so much, and he was like really, really just racing to the tomb based on what the ladies have mentioned to him. He just wanted to see some kind of evidence that definitely, because he kind of knew that Jesus wouldn't be around. And so he just needed that evidence to, that, yeah, he did see all the linen and all the stuff. And then he was also like very respectful to me. I mean, I felt that he knew when to stop. Like it was like a certain sense of awe that he would not go in. It was enough for him to see the stuff.
Okay,
And,
so it was reverence and
reverence.
it was
enough.
enough for him. Okay,
Enough.
good. And
Whereas
anybody
Peter-
else?
Whereas
Yeah.
Peter, whereas Peter is his usual self, his enthusiastic reaction normally. He's very spontaneous. So he would always do that. He would do everything on the spur of the moment. And that's why he just ran straight away. It didn't matter to him. And he had to look at the stuff for evidence to prove it, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other thoughts on this? Very quickly.
Hi, I just want to chip in here. Yeah. I think for John, right, the lack of running in, it's not that he's not interested or he's passive. I would think that he's taking stock. He's standing at entrance there, taking in, probably consumed, overwhelmed by the experience.
Overwhelmed.
And
Yes.
yeah,
yes.
there's probably a flooding of emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's enough for him to stop at the entrance to take stock first, and
Great.
to process his emotions, and the experience that he have taken in before taking a step to go in. Probably, he is basking in the experience, because you remember that Jesus has said to the disciples that he will be resurrected, he will be taken up, so he is probably basking in that encounter.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vincent.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
We saw in Gospels, almost we accept in our Revelations. We have no evidence in Gospels. John entered in grave and he saw. Thank you.
Okay. Not sure I understand everything about that answer, but yeah, it could be, there could be other reasons why he didn't enter as well. I don't know whether you have thought the possibility that perhaps he was a little bit cautious about perhaps in previous situations, he may have found himself going where angels dare to tread, sort of thing, where angels do not dare to tread, and perhaps that's part of the prophetic sort of a caution to cover. Think things carefully about blind spots, his blind spot as well. Perhaps he's more aware of his, he can manage his blind spots, but it is certainly a moment of complete overwhelm. Yeah. And okay, good. Let's continue. This is just preliminary heuristics on how we might be able to read the scripture and perhaps come to some conclusion. All right.
Pastor,
yes, go ahead.
I was also thinking he was like, as long as he saw some evidence, after that he would allow Peter to just come in. And Peter has had always been the leader, right? I think something like that. So he kind of let him do it, do the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, I think you brought up a good point here, that you're going to have different angles and different. So you don't have a Gospel of Peter, but you do have a Gospel of Mark, and Mark is one of the followers after Peter. But you do have a Gospel of John. So this is really an eyewitness account. And interesting, you've got this whole, you've got Mary's testimony, you've got John, what John saw, the grave clothes. And then, of course, you've got Peter possibly handling, but definitely hearing the angel as well. A lot of people, I think myself included, we do look to something about the grave clothes. I think it is a clue. How did they come to that conclusion so quickly about the resurrection? If it were not for some kind of evidence, of course, the angel directly speaks to them, but it's not, it's not direct. It's kind of almost poetic, right? Why do you seek the living among the dead? And so on and so forth. Okay. So we may not be able to exactly pinpoint, okay, John is the prophetia, or Peter is the parakleo, or the Elios or whatever. But we because simply we don't have enough evidence just based on this single incident, right? In verse 5, 6, and 7. But we can in modality research see that certain spots don't change. As they say, a leopard does not change its spots. And there are certain behavioral patterns that are clearly manifested in our working everyday work, and that can be read. We can actually read people's behavior. We could even predict people's behavior sometimes to the same kind of a situation. One hangs back, is more thoughtful, more careful. The other goes straight in. There's another. Can anybody else see any other modality here? Anybody else see another modality, a third modality here?
Pastor Jeroy.
Yes, Annie, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I can't say the exact what modality is on this one, but I think John and Peter has different kind of showing reaction and response on that. Since John is always like seeing, not to touch right away. Unlike Peter, he's very much easy to respond by an action, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That is quite telling in this case. John and Peter. Does anyone see another modal excellence here? Anyone else can capture another modal excellence? What about the way that what strikes me is that the way the head covering is neatly folded. Did anyone catch that? What does that tell you about Christ, about Jesus? It's quite interesting, isn't it? That he's not, he makes his bed. Everything is folded. Everything is orderly.
Everything is in order.
Yeah. And you can be guaranteed that he is in control of the whole situation. Yeah. And so I think when we talk about like archetypes, we cannot really tell an archetype until you see it in action in relation to another archetype. That's how we know. And we were talking about this yesterday in Malaysia with Vincent and the others. That sometimes you can like have two chemicals that seem completely inert, right? But then how come, husbands and wives, and suddenly, and, is a very peaceful person. And then suddenly, it's like, you think about potassium nitrate and you think about sugar, and you put those two together and you heat that, and boom, it's an explosion. So things can get pretty unpredictable depending on how you place the proximity of one chemical with another chemical, one modality with another modality, and under pressure. And it can cause great tectonic shifts, even among countries. That's why it's so dangerous now. They are saying about we don't really know what is the modality of the premier of China, for example, and what is the modality of the army generals or the Pacific 7th Fleet or the president in the Oval Office, who happens to be, of a particular modal excellence. So entire countries, whether you're talking about
Master,
yes, Les.
can I tell, this is my a little experience, not like you and not like other. Our president Imran Khan, his modality is a coach, not a leader.
Okay, well, that's really good for the nation if you have a redeemed coach, because he's going to help others to reach their maximum potential. That would be very, very good, actually. Most coaches, if you think of someone like Nick Vujicic, no arms, no legs, makes you laugh, makes you cry, that sort of thing. That's great. That really help you to. A coach is really, a paraclectic genius is someone who's going to put a scaffold around the country, and then hopefully the country comes up, and then when the country comes up, he comes down again. So I think that is really hopeful, and let's continue to pray for Pakistan and pray for more such coaches, of course, redeemed in their expression of that. Well, okay,
Pastor?
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
It's just gone to my mind. Who do the fold? The angel or Jesus? The folding. The cloth was folded.
Okay, very good. Good.
Who did?
Maybe it doesn't say that Jesus folded his own cloth.
It's not mentioned.
It's not mentioned there. It could have been the angel has a modality. I'm very, very sure angels have modalities too. I believe we will bring our modality with us into the into the experience of the millennium, or after death into our new life in Christ. I believe angels also have modal excellences, because if you read the 7 churches, each church has an angel, and these angels are actually in charge of the arrangement of events, and even sufferings, and even a purpose statement for each of the churches as well. Yeah, whoever it was that folded this cloth certainly have a certain kind of an order. All right, good point. It would not necessarily. It could have been the resurrected Christ. It could have been an angel who made the bed. Yeah. All right. So the title of tentative title of tonight's lesson is Prophetic Pitfalls, which refers to conflicts between these two approaches, or at least these two approaches to Christian service in a local ecclesia, in a church community. On the one hand, prophetic approach emphasizes speaking out against the prophetic, speaking out against injustice and oppression. It can involve lobbying, the government's public protests of some sort for change, and calling out of wrongdoing within the organization, not necessarily the church, but the organization itself. And then you have, together with that, you have the eleemosynary and eleemosynary types of modal expressions. that emphasize charitable giving, acts of kindness towards those in need, such as feeding the hungry, providing shelter for the homeless, visiting the sick and imprisoned. So both of these approaches have their merits and can be seen as essential parts of Christian service. I say that because of the need for wisdom and to understand that we want to embrace as many different kinds of modal excellences because we need all seven, right? So however, conflicts can arise when one approach is emphasized at the expense of the other, and this is a real common issue that we have to face, right? For example, a church that focuses exclusively on delivery of eleemosynary mercy may neglect the need to address systemic injustices that perpetuate poverty and inequalities. So that was the thing with the Mother Teresa thing, do you want to save the old man, the sick and the dying from off the streets, or do you want to go into the reasons why poverty is, getting rid of corruption and political leadership and top government, things like that, cleaning up the streets in that sense, instead of so different approaches, different modal excellencies, and of course the call and the mandate upon the individual local church given by whatever angels that are in charge of the ecclesia at that time. So we want to be extremely careful here and prayerful as well. Similarly, a church, and when I say church, it could be a college, it could be a ministry, you could be leading a group of people, a team in an organization, for example, at the business gate or at the arts gate or education gate or family. It could be a family as well, right? That emphasizes prophetic ministry may fail to show compassion, for example, and care towards those who are suffering, leading to a lack of practical support for those in need. Therefore, it is important for churches to strike a balance between these two approaches and to recognize the value of each. Okay, so in this tutorial, we will be focusing on the challenges faced by individuals who possess prophetic genius within organized structures, particularly those led by leaderships who have institutionalized the concept of mercy, often perceived as, unfortunately and sadly, business as, or rather the other way around, I think missions as business. That has been a common refrain whenever the members of the public they see the hypocrisy in certain when certain church leaders are exposed in the newspaper for whatever reason, and they will go, oh, okay, that's another reason for sort of what do you call church bashing, basically, right? Oh, these guys are just all the time talking about money, blah blah blah, this and that. All right. So one of the main challenges that these individuals face is to struggle to reconcile the prophetic calling with the demands and expectations of institutionalized structures. This often involves navigating a complex web of power dynamics, bureaucratic processes, and cultural norms that may be at odds with the individual's unique vision and approach. And by no means this applies only to churches. You'll see this in Steve Jobs, you'll see this in Apple, the company, where CEOs of companies, they are the visionaries, they're the founding, and then they get sacked somewhere along the line because of the larger goals of the organization. They don't appreciate this sort of founding guy, and then they get rid of him. And then later on, they sort of flounder in their administrative gymnastics. And then they call back the guy, or the other guy comes back to rescue the organization. Crazy things like that. So by no means this is just a Christian thing. This is true in every organization. Okay. But definitely Jesus does make mention of this kind of dynamic when he said that a prophet is not honored in his own country, honored for his unique contributions and so on and so forth. That's very clear. Okay, so what we can say then is that despite these challenges, however, the tutorial emphasizes the importance of staying true to one's prophetic call and finding creative ways to navigate the complex terrain of institutionalized structures in order to achieve meaningful impact and change. So the Holy Spirit will move upon you. There'll be possibly, as a young minister, if you're just starting out, it's actually very good to be in a big organization where you can learn the ropes. And basically a negative example, how not to do church. And you can see all the inconsistencies and the errors and the blind spots of your leaders, blah blah blah, right? Just like it's a training, it's an internship, it's a training, it's your own personal development, and it's not your time yet. Remember, Jesus was constantly like being told what to do as a young minister, even his mother, right? And then one time he, at a wedding, he snaps at the mother and he says, "What? Well, they ran out of wine, right? So what does that have to do with me, woman?" He's a little bit curt to his own mother, right? But of course he complies and he does the miracle. Well, he did not know that actually that's the beginning of his public ministry. And so this miracle of the turning of water into wine at Cana becomes the sort of the launching pad for his public ministry thereafter. But it's good for us to go through certain pains and heartaches and disappointments and so on and so forth to break us and to get us ready for when the time comes for us to lead our own ministry or whatever team ministries that God gives to us and so on. So okay, let's go on. So I'm not going to go through the prophetic genius. Let me just share the screen again. I'm not going to go through this because you can read it for yourself in the notes. So point number 1 is the prophetic genius. So I'll leave you to go into chapter 9, okay? Except to say, in order to fully understand the prophetic genius, it is important to look at its pattern throughout history, from the first Adam to the last. So that's how we study modalities. The laws of Adam, the laws of Moses, all the way to Peter, to Paul, to John, to Jesus, right? From beginning to end, Revelation, Genesis to Revelation. By studying this pattern, we can gain a deeper insight into the evolution of prophetic thought and how it has shaped our understanding of the world. This can be done by analyzing the various ways in which prophets have communicated their message, the different forms their prophecies have taken place, and the impact they have had on society. Okay, so I'll leave you to read chapter 9 in our book, Secrets of the Menorah. So I put the DNA or the source codes of the college into a book, which I believe I'm still waiting for some of the endorsements to come in. So those of you who are writing endorsements, please do go ahead and read the whole book, all 12 chapters or 11 chapters. Yeah, 12 chapters. And then if you can write something like not more than 300 words, that would be good. I'll leave you to read that on the elemental archetype of the prophetia. Okay. And then point number 2, again, I'll leave you to read chapter 6 in our book, Secrets of the Menorah. Why menorah? There are 7 branches. Each branch represents one biblical archetype. And then, of course, I'll just go straight to point number 3, which is the conflict resolution issue. Okay, so one of the challenges that people with prophetic gifts face is working with established structures. So we call this new wine in old wineskin. Okay, and you have to be very careful because sometimes the wineskins can break and you can waste the whole work of a previous generation. So sometimes it's better to walk away. Sometimes it's better to walk away. And then God gives you a new wineskin, and then you go ahead and you leave the other sort of vat or the other barrel of wine alone, something like that. And then God gives you something else. So sometimes God calls you to stay and revolutionize from within. Sometimes there's a new wine needs new wineskin. So there's no fixed or there's no formula. It's not formularistic for this. Okay. And so, yeah, this is the opposite of conducting business as missions, as we said just now. It's mission as business, and prophets who are called to speak truth to power may find themselves at odds with those who prioritize financial gain over fulfilling their mission to help others. It can be difficult for prophets to navigate this tension, as they may feel called to speak out against abuses of power and corruption, but also need to maintain positive relationships with those in leadership positions. Again, it depends. It depends on your own modality. If you are a prophetia, you are going to be really careful, I think, like perhaps what John was. Before jumping in to anything, he's going to be very, very careful of his next move to make sure that his conclusions line up and he has confirmation. And of course, there you go. Peter is right on his heels, and Peter goes in and gives the confirmation. And then it's doubly confirmed, with the angels and with what Mary, her encounter. And then later on, he meets Christ himself in person, the resurrected Christ. So, this is the reason why hotels, they don't hire prophetias. Otherwise, you change the whole hotel. You change the whole paradigm of a hotel, right? It's a very, very special class of giftedness and genius. So sometimes, furthermore, prophetic individuals may face resistance from those who view their gifts as a threat to the status quo. Despite these challenges, prophetic individuals continue to play a vital role in promoting justice and integrity within established structures. And it is important for them to persevere in their calling despite the difficulties they may encounter. You can also call prophetess futurists. And by the way, if you haven't gone through Modalities 101, again, please let us know, and we will put you into the matriculation course. So everyone does the 3 courses, the GNT, Greek New Testament, and then they do the Modalities for Life, and then they have to do Ancient Hostilities before you can move on to the rest of the courseware. So that's kind of like going to take you about for you maybe anywhere from 6 months, 8 months, or even a year. That's okay. There's no real rush to get through. And in any case, like for GNT, you're going to be using the tools that we teach you right throughout the 3 years, or however long it takes. For some, it's going to be 3, 4, 5 years before you feel ready for graduation. All right. So futurists who have the ability to foresee and even predict how profit and organizational objectives can clash with the spiritual or prophetic nature of their work often find themselves struggling to reconcile their calling with the demands of the modern world. This phenomena has given rise to a growing sense of angst among many futurists who see the need to balance the practical considerations of running a successful enterprise with the purity of their vision. Despite these challenges, however, many futurists remain committed to staying true to their calling and finding innovative ways to bring their ideas to fruition. So, okay, that's it in the bibliography. Just a couple of nice videos that you might want to watch on the Shroud of Turin and make up your own mind. And then the three videos. There are 2-minute videos, 3 2-minute videos on John 20 and verse 5. You don't need to. There's not going to be an exam or anything like that. Don't worry about that. Just make sure that you understand the idea of pitfalls and incursions and gaps and places, breaches in the defenses, where you want to pay attention so that we don't come away with this this kind of very flippant attitude towards relationships, because really the ecclesia is all about the people, and you really want to preserve the unity as much as possible. Of course, sometimes it's not possible, and the Lord will lead you out of a assembly to form another assembly or to multiply. The best way would be to multiply but all of it requires very, very careful listening, if not to a direct word from God, certainly to the heuristics of it. So, okay, that's it for tonight. And what you can do, as I say, if you haven't signed up for the Greek, go ahead and do that. Nazelle can help you there and get you straight away in a class, and then start you off. It's a very, very simple method that I have created. For me, 40 years ago, I really sweated and slogged and cried through 4 years of Greek, and I have come out with this very, very simple system. And there's a couple of videos for you to watch and a little bit of memory work, but most of it is, you already know it. If you've taken mathematics in school, you'll already know half of the Greek alphabets. And then, of course, if you haven't done modalities, please do that. If you would like to write an endorsement for my book, please do that. But read the book first. Make sure you read the book first. And then Ancient Hostilities is, if you haven't done the 10-part course on Ancient Hostilities, it's going to be conducted by my wife, and it's going to be an executive mentoring program. So Lian will lead you in that. We've got good response. Over half of the cohort